there and welcome along to this edition of Games and Goals on RTB News. I'm Adam Reed in London and this is Reuters. Coming up on the programme. Will he stay or will he go as Diego Costa is courted by China? We ask how much he's really worth to Chelsea. We talk exclusively with Arsenal's Petr Cech and Olivier Giroud, who are calling on the club to tie up new deals for Arsene Wenger and two of their teammates. And there was an unlikely match winner for Liverpool. Find out who scored his first goal in 7 years for the Reds as they progressed in the FA Cup. First though, two top Premier League performers have been making headlines this week and both could be on their way out of England in this transfer window. Dimitri Payet looks to be forcing a move away from West Ham back to France, while Diego Costa, Chelsea's leading goalscorer, is the subject of interest from the Chinese Premier League, as Matt Gooderick explains.
So is Diego Costa on his way to Chelsea or staying at Stamford Bridge? Well, early in the week it seemed a move to Tianjin FC was a distinct possibility with a reported £30 million a year on the table. While pictures of the striker training on his own at Chelsea's training ground appeared to suggest his days there were numbered. But China's interest, well, it seems to have cooled as the weeks progressed, largely because of a newly announced 3 foreign player rule that's been introduced. Shenzhen's chairman admits that could scupper a deal, while also saying he's only interested in a deal this month and not at the end of the Premier League season. Well, surely Chelsea won't want to lose Costa. He certainly played his part in the side's rise to the top of the Premier League. His decisive goals in games have brought about 15 points for Chelsea this season. Take a look, he scored the winning goal in 5 games this season. Of the players Chelsea have been rumoured to be looking at as his replacement, Fernando Llorente of Swansea has been mentioned, but if you compare the two players, Costa has the better record. He has more goals, assists and he scores more frequently, but then again Llorente has been playing for a struggling side, so maybe 6 goals isn't such a bad return. And of course Antonio Conte knows him very well indeed from Italy, where he signed him at Juventus and they won Serie A together. So, as you can see, Costa has been invaluable to Chelsea this season as they've moved 7 points clear at the top of the table. No player is irreplaceable, but you can see why China has come calling.
Well, joining me this week to discuss the latest transfer talk and everything else in the world of football is former Chelsea defender Jason Cundy and Reuters senior sports analyst Nigel Stevenson. Jason, coming to you first with your Chelsea hat firmly on. If Costa stays or goes, how unsettling has this week been though?
Well, we'll find out in the coming weeks. It's not a great time because we saw that he was left out of the squad and the team when Chelsea went to Leicester and won 3-0. I think Conte has played this exceptionally well. There appears to have been a big bust up down at the training ground, and how much of this Chinese influences we don't quite know, but clearly they're in the background and they're the ones that may have unsettled the player. £30 million a year, quadruple your wages. Who in this room wouldn't want to go and say, let me speak to those people?
Big money.
It is indeed. Of course, the Chinese, this is their big transfer window, so they don't really want to wait until the summer. My gut feeling is this will be resolved. He's back training now with the first team. We've got Hull at the weekend. If he doesn't play in that game, almost certainly he'll be playing in the FA Cup.
Now, Nigel, but even though he may come back into the side, is this a sign that player power that we've been talking about for a few years is going to a whole new level?
It is slightly, but I guess what is happening is that we're getting to the stage where people's bluff are going to be called, in that, say Costa tries this on and it doesn't work, and I know we're going to talk about Payet in a minute, so the two cases are slightly different, but eventually somebody is going to say, I'm worth this much, I think. The club will say, you might think that, but we don't, so somebody's bluff is going to get called. Player power is increasing, but there are limits, so you have to be a little bit careful how this one plays out. It's very interesting.
Well, it's very interesting indeed. He's clearly a very important player to Chelsea, top scorer in the Premier League, as we saw there. Now, Jason, Dimitri Payet, a similar situation, not exactly the same, but just quickly explain about how you see this one panning out. What happens to Payet come the end of January?
Well, he doesn't want to be at the club. He's made that perfectly clear. West Ham have said we're not going to sell him, we're going to keep him. Personally, I don't see any value in that. The player is desperate to go back, it would appear, to France. And everyone's calling Payet greedy and has no loyalty. There is no loyalty in football. And loyalty, both sides, by the way. If Payet wasn't doing the business, West Ham would get rid of him. Let's have that absolutely right. But he's moving for less money, so there's no greed involved here, where fans and people in the media like to accuse footballers of being. He clearly wants his future elsewhere. And I believe a player, if he's not happy at a football club, has to do what he can to get out of that situation. He's got 1 month in which to do that. And by the end of January, if he doesn't move, he has to wait until the summer.
Interesting, the former player sticking up for the player.
There you go.
But yeah, no surprise there. Now, plenty of speculation still going on at Arsenal with the futures of Alexis Sanchez and Mesut Ozil still to be resolved. Now, I spoke exclusively to Petr Cech and Olivier Giroud this week, who believe the club can only win the league if they hang on to their best players and also want Arsene Wenger to stay on as manager.
We expect that the boss, we hope that the boss will sign a new contract because, we all want to keep going with this squad and even the other players. So, yeah, it's a nice news for the team, for the club, and from my side, obviously, it's a good thing because I feel very good at the Arsenal, and I really want to carry on to win the league, and to always improve myself.
It's crucial for everybody to make sure that you have a stability in the team, you keep your best players, and obviously you have the possibilities to add to the squad when it's needed. And I think last couple of years, Arsenal made a huge step forward in terms of signing players. Signed Mesut, Alexis Sanchez, coming from Barcelona. We are competing, we are getting ready, and we want to win things. And this is probably the most important for the players when you decide about the future. You want to be in an environment which matches your ambitions and motivation.
Very interesting, Jason, from Giroud and Cech about matching the potential motivations and ambitions of a club. They did sort out 5 player contracts in the past week, but not Sanchez and Ozil. What can we read into that?
Well, they clearly want a lot of money. We're just going back to the Diego Costa situation. They both value themselves at around about £250,000 a week. Arsenal have been known to have a tight wage structure, and they're going to have to bust that. For me, I don't think Mesut Ozil is worth anywhere near that. I would move him on personally. Sanchez is the one. If Arsenal are to do anything this season and in the coming seasons, he is absolutely key. But it makes me laugh when players are saying we want the manager to stay. Well, what are they going to say? Well, you asked the question. They're not going to say, no, we want him to go. And it should have no relation to whatsoever if a player is staying. You sign for the club. No one knows what's going to happen in football, but the way Arsenal Football Club is run, it's almost certain if they finish inside the top 4 that he will sign another 2 years.
And Nigel, on the subject of Alexis Sanchez, he clearly has shown in the past few weeks that his emotions are worn on his sleeve. We saw his reaction after the draw at Bournemouth. Still scoring goals though, but he's not quite happy. So what does this mean in terms of how the situation might pan out?
I've got absolutely no idea. It's absolutely fascinating watching him at the moment. I have to say that Wenger brings this on himself with his 2-year deal the whole time. He should put that one to bed and the club should put that one to bed. Either he stays or he says, in 3 years' time, I'm leaving, because that then gets rid of all that uncertainty. Sanchez, what can you say? I mean, he scores a goal, plays brilliantly, gets substituted and puts his cloak over his head. Yeah, well, there you are.
But this is also another example of it as well. Yeah.
And you just think, I'd love to be inside that brain. What is going on? I don't know. I mean, he's adored there, rightfully. He's brilliant to watch. He just lights up the whole place. Does he want to leave? I don't know.
From his point of view, he must be thinking, I can't play any better.
No.
He's at the top of his game, the peak of his powers, and Arsenal really aren't going to win the title this year. And he must be thinking, I'm getting no help around me.
Well, it's going to be very interesting to see because he is very key to Arsenal now. Time for a short break here on Games and Goals, but plenty still to come. We head to Manchester after the break and ask why it's not quite working out for City and Pep Guardiola. Now, it's been 10 years since there hasn't been a Manchester club inside the Premier League's top 4 at this stage of the season, but that's the position City and United currently find themselves in after both failing to win last weekend. We'll come on to the red half draw with Liverpool in just a moment, but to the embarrassment now of Pep Guardiola at Everton. Now, here's a reminder of just how bad things got for City last Sunday. Everton scoring past Claudio Bravo with all of their 4 shots on target, with 2 teenage scorers getting their first goals for the club. Local lad Tom Davis with a well-crafted third and a goal on debut for Adoma Lookman in added time. Now, guys, Jason, I'm going to come to you first and talk about Manchester City. Guardiola said they did have enough chances to score, but given the resources that he's got at his disposal, should they be making excuses like this?
No, absolutely not. They had overwhelming majority of possession, didn't do anything with it. They had a couple of chances, it's true, but you can't take anything away from Everton. They were by far the better side, despite the fact they had not as much possession. In fact, I think it was about 70-30 in Man City's favour. But the problem they've got is at the back. You know, Man City generally create chances and will score in most of those games that they play like that, given the chance. But at the back's the problem. Now, Claudio Bravo, by the way, that is one big rick that they have made in getting rid of Joe Hart. He doesn't save shots. Every single time the ball goes, he's like a 10-year-old boy in goal. He has no presence. Every shot that goes past are down here or there. He hasn't got that same presence. They have got major problems at the back, and it'd be interesting to see exactly what he does in the transfer.
Nigel, can we point the finger simply at Claudio Bravo? Do more people need to stand up? I mean, their recruitment policy down the years, even.
You can slightly point the finger at Bravo, as Jason's just said, but it's also to do with the manager saying, I'm going to play this style come hell or high water. We're not changing. And clearly, as the confidence ebbs away at the back, not only is it means that every time there's a corner or any the ball goes into the box, the whole thing just shatters, but also the people up front are looking behind them, and that affects them too. So it's more to do with the manager, really. He's chosen Bravo. He's stuck with him. He's still insisting on lots of back passes, which, you know, your heart's in your mouth every time you watch. I mean, it's thrilling to watch because you just think someone's going to make an awful error, and I'm going to see Sergio Aguero scoring goals. What more do you want to watch?
Yeah, well, exactly. Well, Claudio Bravo, obviously, we saw from there that he's obviously not installing that much confidence. City, they're way off the pace in the Premier League. They are still in the Champions League. What should they be aiming for? What is possible now for Man City this season, very quickly?
Well, mathematically, they still win the title. They probably won't, because defensively they just can't keep a clean sheet. He was brought in to win the Champions League. They're still in it. The irony would be, of course, if they finish outside the top four this season, and his job was to mainly bring in to go and win that Champions League. They can still win the Champions League. They have a really good squad, and maybe the style of football is more suited to the European game, in which they may actually progress, and they should get past in the next round. But he has got major problems at the back, and he's very arrogant. I think he perhaps came to England and has underestimated the Premier League somewhat.
Well, Monaco for them next in the Champions League, but the Premier League is still going to be high on their agenda. Now, Jose Mourinho's Manchester United were accused of resorting to long ball tactics by Jurgen Klopp following Zlatan Ibrahimovic's late equaliser against Liverpool. Marouane Fellaini was sent on as a substitute for the end of what Klopp called a wild game, and he played a big part in the goal, which brought a point for Manchester United.
It looks like it was a penalty, and even Michael Oliver in the end of the game told me this time was a penalty, so I respect that was a penalty.
"70 minutes minimum. Over the whole game, we were the better side. So, but of course, then they came with the long ball, whatever it is. So, Fellaini on the pitch, and that's difficult.
You scoring in the last part of the game, I think the team that concedes a goal feels worse than the team that scores. But in the end, we lost 2 points because we were playing for 3. And the way they played, I think they are happy with the point. So probably they go happy.
Yellow card for Herrera and nothing else. At the end, it's a yellow card for the guy who wanted to play football.
Nah, he thought I was asking for his player to be sent off. I wasn't.
Well, Jason, it was obviously an incredibly frenetic game, as you'd expect those to be. But Jurgen Klopp calling Manchester United a long ball side, and they did obviously flood the box with big players. What do you make of that, considering he's been critical of Chelsea's direct play this season?
Listen, there's many different ways of trying to win a football match, and there's no right and wrong way. It's about getting the result and finding a way to get Manchester United back into that game. And it worked. When you've got Fellaini on the bench and you've got Zlatan up top, 6'3", 6'4" giants, pump that ball in. Liverpool looked uncomfortable. And the problem with Liverpool sometimes is actually they don't do that enough for me. You know, up against Southampton in the first leg of the League Cup semi-final, they're up against a brick wall. They brought Coutinho on, they're trying to pass through all the time. Southampton look very comfortable. Sometimes you need a different way to get a result, and Manchester United come up with the right answer.
Well, Nigel, I mean, this is a game that was obviously billed as a big game anyway, but taking points off your rivals, how important is that when it comes to winning titles?
Obviously very, because every 3 points is 3 points. So you beat the teams that are below you and you try and take points off. Sorry, I'm going to be a bit critical here, but you have to win games. You need to beat the sides below you and also beat the sides that are in form. So someone like Tottenham, for example, and Liverpool, who are both in form, need to keep doing it to see if they can keep up with Chelsea. And then they need to beat Chelsea. So, I mean, that's maths, I'm afraid.
Simple maths, yeah. Well, quite telling there that Manchester City with a -7 goal difference out of that mini league. Now, looking ahead to this weekend's Premier League games, and United take a trip to Stoke with arguably the game of the weekend, seeing Manchester City taking on in-form Tottenham. Here's a look at how the fixtures do line up. Elsewhere, Everton will look to pick up where they left off against City when they go to Selhurst Park, with Sam Allardyce still looking for a first league win since taking over. Liverpool have the chance to move back into second at home to Swansea, while on Sunday there'll be a lot of focus on London, with Arsenal hosting Burnley and Chelsea at home to Hull. Now, Nigel, I'll come to you again. Manchester City taking on an informed Tottenham side. Given what we've seen over the past 2 weekends, contrasting 4-0 scorelines, should City fans be slightly worried facing a Spurs side in form?
Yes, extremely. But knowing Man City, they'll go and thrash Spurs. So, and actually, Spurs, that's where it's more about Spurs. This one, as far as I'm.
They're on a
great run, but they've got to go to the Etihad and they've got to beat Man City, who will be smarting. This is the big test for Tottenham. If they can't come up with the goods on matches like that, then I don't think they're title contenders. And they're also scoring freely, which is great. But if they don't beat Manchester City, suddenly that momentum goes out. You know, they beat West Brom, and I'm a West Brom fan, as you know. It wasn't very difficult. So they've got to actually kick on and start beating the likes of Man City at their place.
Well, it would mean they would do the double over them this season. Now, time for another short break here on Games and Goals, but plenty still to come, including how China's FA is looking to curb the lavish spending on foreign talent in a bid to nurture domestic players. Now, news from Spain and China to come, but first, Liverpool are through to the 4th round of the FA Cup. They avoided any embarrassment by beating their 4th-tier rivals Plymouth Argyle 1-0 in their replay. Now, Liverpool fans would have raised an eyebrow when they saw who scored the only goal. Lucas Leiva with the header. Now, that's the first time in 7 years he's found the net. Plymouth, who are 66 places below Liverpool in English football, had their chances. Arnold Gurita was inches wide here. And then Jake Jervis struck the post with a flying volley in the second half. Liverpool, though, deserved the win, and they could have had another goal before the end. Alberto Moreno was hacked down in the area, but Divock Origi's penalty was straight at Plymouth keeper Luke McCormack. Liverpool face Wolves at Anfield in round 4. Now to Spain now. Real Madrid saw their league cut at the top of La Liga to just a point after defeat against Sevilla last weekend, and that was followed by a further defeat in the first round of their Copa del Rey quarter-final on Wednesday. Speaking ahead of that midweek defeat, Zinedine Zidane already had warned against a negative mentality.
Non, moi j'aurais aimé continuer.
Well, I would have preferred to keep winning and not lose, because that's what we're all working for here. It's true that when it happens, it's because we're maybe missing something. We've had time to analyse things, and we might have to think about working a bit more before we can get back on the right path. I have to say, I would have liked to win. It wasn't positive.
Ma réponse c'est celle-là, c'est se remettre encore peut-être plus au travail.
Nigel, a word about Real Madrid. No La Liga title, believe it or not, since 2012. They do very well in the Champions League. Where do their priorities lie, particularly this season?
Well, not with the Copa del Rey, to be perfectly honest with you. But this is the first leg of the round. They've still got the second one. They were 2-1 down. You would expect. And I have some sympathy with them and with Zidane there. How do you raise them when 1 week they're playing Champions League and it's really important? You're going for that. You're trying to play against Sevilla in the league, and then you've got to have lowly Copa del Rey opponents who you go and lose to. They've got to up themselves, and it's really difficult. Bale's not around. Ronaldo's doing what he does, but that's when the rest of these people have to earn their money. Frankly, you should go through that. They're still top of the league with a game in hand.
Only a point lead though, and that's
with a game in hand.
Oh yeah,
against Valencia, I think, who are right down at towards the bottom. So they're still there. But when you're on a fantastic winning run, a bit like Chelsea, it comes to an end, and hopefully for them that re-energises rather than deflates. So,
well, on the subject, Nigel brought it up, Jason. Ronaldo trying to do his best. Bale not available. No one else is coming close to Ronaldo in the scoring charts. Is it about time that somebody else sort of stepped up and took that mantle?
It's very difficult when you look at someone like Ronaldo. I mean, he seems to get better with age and the way that his game has changed.
They're a long way behind, though, the rest of the goal scorers, as you see there.
Yeah, I mean, but when you've got someone like Ronaldo... listen, I've got no sympathy with Real Madrid if they can't have someone else. They spend enough money. There's enough players in that squad there, not the ones even on the list there, that they can step up to the plate. Listen, they've been on a wonderful run. First defeat in 41 games, but now they've got 2 defeats in 2. Is there a chink in the armour? I think Zidane will get them back on track. They've been magnificent over the last 18 months or so.
He's had a very good start to his managerial career, hasn't he? Now, over to China, and we heard earlier in the show that Diego Costa's move to Shenzhen FC may be scuppered because of a new rule over overseas players that sides can play. Clubs in the Chinese Super League will be limited to fielding a maximum of 3 foreign players per game from the 2017 season. A spate of investment by top clubs has seen players such as Brazilians Oscar from Chelsea and Argentine Carlos Tevez join on big money moves. Oscar joins Shanghai in a deal said to have made him the highest paid player in the world. This rampant spending has been criticised with some suggestions that domestic talent is being neglected. The new rule, though, will mean that clubs will still be able to register 5 foreign players in their overall squad, but only 3 can be used in a game. Very interesting, Nigel. Now, the CSL has had a lot of detractors, but is this a sign that they are thinking slightly more long-term rather than just throwing money at things?
Yes. Do you remember President Xi Jinping came over to Manchester City basically saying, we want China to win the World Cup in, I can't remember how many years, and this is what it's all about. So they've got enough money there. They don't want the Harlem Globetrotters, basically. They don't want to just bring in a whole load of Brazilians and European players, because that's not what the end game is. The end game is to improve Chinese football. They're throwing a lot of money at it, and if the result is that you get a load of foreigners in, that's not really achieving what you went out to do. A smattering, that raises the profile, does exactly what it should. I think it's a very sensible move. I'm not sure I'm going to say that we should do it in Europe just yet, but from the Chinese point of view, it's absolutely spot on.
Well, Jason, on that point, I mean, the European names still get linked. Is it going to become a cliche that everyone's going to China still, or is this going to change things slightly?
It just tells me, actually, they've not really had this full planning. They've changed this rule halfway through, and it would appear that it's happened as this big transfer window has opened. There is a scattergun approach. I don't know whether they sit down and look at the type of centre forward that they want. For example, Diego Costa. Well, he's a type of centre forward. I don't think they look at his game and think, right, how are we going to build play around him? I think they're just throwing money at it. And of course, we know in any industry, if you throw enough money at it, you generally get what you want.
Thank you for the moment, Jason and Nigel. And now away from football this week, let's bring you up to date with the other sports stories making their headlines. And there's been a big shock at the Australian Open. Novak Djokovic, the number 2 seed, has been knocked out in Melbourne. The 6-time champion went down in 5 sets to Dennis Istomin, who's ranked 117 in the world. It's the first time Djokovic has lost in the second round of a Grand Slam since 2008. Well, there was no such trouble for Andy Murray, although there was a bit of an injury worry for the world number 1 in his second round match against Andrei Rublev. Still, Murray dusted himself down to progress in straight sets, dropping just 5 games along the way. Now, Australia's Caleb Ewan again showed off his sprinting prowess to hold off world champion Peter Sagan and claim his second stage victory at Cycling's Tour Down Under. Richie Porte finished in the pack and does retain the overall lead. Staying with racing, but of a different sort, Valtteri Bottas has been named as Nico Rosberg's replacement at Mercedes. He made the switch from Williams, where he spent 4 seasons. The Finn will partner triple world champion Lewis Hamilton. Now, Nico Rosberg retired, of course, just days after winning his maiden World Drivers' title. And here's one I'm glad I'm reading from the warmth of the studio. Some 30 swimmers braved frosty waters of Germany's Chemnitz over the weekend for the race to be crowned Ice King or Queen of the famous lake near Munich. In snow with freezing air temperatures, men and women competed several disciplines rather than me. Well, that's just about it for this week's show, but please do join us next time, when we will find out if Jose Mourinho has reached his first final as Manchester United manager. His side have the advantage going into their League Cup semi-final against Hull. Well, that is just about it for this edition of Games and Goals. My thanks to Jason and Nigel for their contributions. I'm Adam Reed, signing off from the Reuters studio here in London. Goodbye for now.